Today, we're going to talk about some of the main points at which you need to be getting feedback for your no-code app throughout your development and launch phases. And it's really important that you know when and where to get feedback, because if you don't do this, you will be building your app for yourself and not your users. And that is not what you want to do. You want to be building the app for your users. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And make sure you stick around until the end, because we're also going to talk about a training that's going to let you dive way deeper into this right now. So first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen, and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help business owners and industry experts build custom apps to either start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses, all without coding and no technical background required. So let's talk about feedback. This is one of the absolute biggest priorities that you should be thinking about right now. And it doesn't matter which stage of development or launch you're in with your app, because at every point you should be thinking about feedback. And the different types of feedback that you should be getting really vary. So that's what we're going to dive into. So first, let me share my screen. We're going to jump over to the whiteboard here, and we're going to talk through this. So basically, when you come up with your app idea or your idea for a solution to a problem, and you think about the features and the different functionality that it should have, and you think about the different types of users it should have, you are making a lot of assumptions. And that's okay. You will be making assumptions as you go, but it's important that you turn those assumptions into data. If you leave them as assumptions, you never get the data, and the data comes along with the feedback, then again, you're not going to be building your app for your user base. You're going to be building the app based on a lot of guesses. So you want to validate those assumptions or validate those guesses. Obviously, these should be smart assumptions or guesses. You shouldn't just be, making things up as you go. But assuming you're not doing that, you want to get feedback so that you can make sure that you're headed in the right direction. You can think of going out into the ocean on a ship, and knowing that you have a destination in mind, and as you go, you might kind of veer off path a little bit, still while going in the right general direction, but you might veer off path a bit. And so once you kind of get out your compass, or I'm no ship captain, so I don't know how to explain this, but when you get out your navigational tools, you can course correct, right? You can get back on course, continue going in the right direction. You might veer off again. You might keep veering as you go, but you're still going in the right direction. Every time you get out your navigational tools, you're getting the data that you need to make sure you're staying steered in the right direction. That is what we're talking about here. And it's so important that you do this. And unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs don't. So there are different points in your development and launch journey, and when you're scaling your app and your app-based business as well, that you should be getting feedback. So first, it starts when you have really just come up with your solution in the first place, right? This is your app. You want to call it a solution because that makes it not just an idea, right? So this is when you come up with your solution. You need to get feedback. You need to make sure that people actually want and need this as a solution, right? You can think it's a really cool idea, but again, if no one needs and wants it, then it doesn't really matter. So this is the first point at which you need to start getting some good feedback. And then once you've done that, you need to start getting your product feedback. And this is usually when we're in the version 1 stage. You might be building a prototype. You might be building a minimum viable product. You also need to get feedback here, and your feedback here is going to come in 2 different ways. Feedback number 1 is going to be on your product's functionality. You need to make sure that it is functioning correctly. You need to make sure that everything is working as it should. Now, going back just a moment to this first point here, our solution, If you're building a solution, that means that it's solving some sort of a problem, right? Well, when you're creating the first version of your product and you're testing for functionality, you want to make sure that the solution is working in order to solve that problem, right? But we're looking at it from a functional standpoint. So you also need to look at it from a usability standpoint, from an adoption standpoint. When you bring users onto the app, are they able to consistently use it? Is it solving that problem that it's been created to solve? And is it solving it well? Can you solve it better? Can you solve it in a more convenient way? Can you solve it in a more user-friendly way? Can you solve it in a different way? Are you solving it in the wrong way? Right? We start to look at adoption, and we start to look at not just providing that core solution, the first version of your app, but now expanding on top of that, again, using your feedback. You can have lots of assumptions. In fact, you can have assumptions that really apply to later stages in your app, all the way over here when we're looking at your business and all of that. But you don't want to put those assumptions into play, the ones that will apply later down the road, until you get these different stages of your feedback, because it all has to happen in the right order. If you wait too long to get this initial feedback, then you're going to be wasting a lot of time, right? Or if you try to get feedback for, later features, later functionality, later user types even, if you try to get that early on, then you're not going to have the right base to be really getting the right feedback with, because your app, again, has to be solving that core problem. It's providing this core solution. So, think of it kind of like building a pyramid. You have to start with the first layer, and that layer has to be correct. It has to be strong enough to support the other ones on top of that. And then you start adding on more and more. Well, it's the same, it's the same with your development, it's the same with your launch, it's the same with anything really, but even with your feedback, you have to start getting the right layers of feedback. Every single one of these layers builds on top of the previous one. So we have the feedback on your idea or your solution. We have the feedback on the functionality of that first version of your product. We have the feedback on the adoption, how to make it better. Well, when we look at what we'll call your rollout phase, where you're moving beyond, your beta testing and going through different waves of that, and now you're really rolling out the app. Well, you need to be getting feedback here too. And the feedback here is going to happen in a couple of different ways. So first, think about rolling out your app. And I like to use the word rolling out because it really is a progression. It's not even just one launch. It really is an ongoing thing. So you have your idea, you have the first version of your product, it's gone through testing, and now you are releasing it to a more widespread user base. Well, you're going to continuously jump back over to this phase and back over to this phase, including both of these feedback phases down here, but with different or additional feature sets or different iterations of certain components in your app. So you're constantly going to be going back, and you're also going to be going forward, using feedback to go forward as you really just start to expand. And we can kind of lump this into the rollout phase if we wanted to, but just to make the point a little bit more clear, once you do get into this rollout phase, you'll be going backwards in terms of the type of feedback that you're getting, because your app is rolling out, right? You have released version 1. Well, now you're rolling out version 2, version 3, version 4, whatever it may be. And with each version, there's going to be new ideas, new assumptions, and new feedback needed, right? And so you'll be going back and getting that feedback, but you're also going to be going forward, where You are maybe adding on new user types, right? Or things like that. And as you do that, you will get feedback from them. You'll get feedback from those new user types. And again, it kind of, I mean, at the end of the day, it really does all just cycle through constantly. It's that build, measure, learn cycle, right? You are releasing the different version or releasing the different solution, releasing the different user type, the features that accommodate the new user type, whatever it is, right? You're building that, you're measuring, you're intaking feedback at every single one of these points, right? You're getting different types of feedback and you're learning from that. You're taking that feedback to refine and improve, and then you just go straight back into it. And so for most people who are starting out with their apps, obviously you're going to be in probably one of these two stages. You might be in the rollout stage, but most people who we work with, they're coming to us and they have their solution in mind. Maybe they have a little bit of their version 1, but they might want to rebuild. So they're in the beginning. And if you're in these stages, feedback is always important. It's important at every single step, right? That's what this is all about. But it's so important in these initial stages. Make sure you have the feedback on the solution you have come up with, right? On those assumptions. In fact, call them assumptions. Call your idea, or even your ideas for the different feature sets you want, call them assumptions. Because when you do that, it's going to reframe it in your mind and it's going to make feedback a priority. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of miss the mark, is that they don't think of them as assumptions, and therefore they skip all of these different phases where they should be getting feedback. So call that idea an assumption. Call that product your assumption, right? It's not saying that you don't know that people want it or need it. It's not saying that it's not validated. It's just going to force you to look for feedback. It's going to force you to make that a higher priority. So I hope this helps you. There's, again, you're going to be getting feedback all throughout. And while this sometimes sounds kind of obvious, the reason why I wanted to take some time to talk about it today is because a lot of people think that you just build your app, you build the whole thing, everything you have in mind, and then you launch it. It's an official launch that you're building up to, and then you get the feedback. But that's really doing it backwards, right? The feedback has to start at different incremental stages, right? All throughout, before your launch and after your launch. And then after your launch, you'll continuously go back into those earlier feedback stages. So I really, really encourage you to look at it this way. It's going to make such a big difference in the overall time span that it takes you to not just build your app, because you're going to have pinpointed feedback on exactly what you should be building, but also on how long it takes you to launch your app, to go through those testing phases, and to ultimately scale your app. Because again, you're going to be doing all of those things based on data versus just assumptions. So you have to turn those assumptions into data. And that is going to keep your ship steered in the right direction the whole way, instead of having you veer off path and not realize it, just continue going until it's too late. And then you have to do major backtracking, major course correcting. So keep this in mind. All right, again, I hope that was helpful. And if you want to take this way further, you want to go through a step-by-step process that we actually start our clients out with in order to make sure that they are, number one, building the right things at the right time with their app so that they can launch efficiently and effectively, but also so they can start, again, adding these feedback stages in at the right time. So if you want to get started with that training, you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. You can sign up, you can join in. It's totally free. So I hope you find that helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.